that set up appropriate as well. Okay, so hopping into the second class for cryptocurrencies with Nobel Trading. My name is Josh Bratcher. I'm the founder and also an investment strategist for CWR Private Client Group. And I just wanted to go ahead and take a moment and just kind of walk everyone through some more of the complex mechanics of cryptocurrencies. And starting with that, we're just going to go ahead and break down the larger environment that cryptocurrencies exist in. And that actually starts with the electricity that they utilize. And it's a really important thing to consider because that is actually most of the debate that occurs with cryptocurrencies, is that they often frequently have a massive amount of electric draw that they need to keep constant supply. Now, in an environment where we have a surplus of energy and there isn't a short supply of oil, this is actually a huge benefit to have these massive mining companies that all they do is just mine cryptocurrencies. They're a huge draw of energy, but it's a huge draw of consistent energy, which is actually healthy for infrastructure in the country and electricity. Whether that energy is coming from solar power or just your basic utility companies, which is coal or oil or even nuclear energy, which is kind of falling off. It's important to consider these things because in the current environment that we find ourselves in, we have a lot of energy shortages, and normal money, it's more expensive to purchase that energy, right? But in the future, if we start massively using cryptocurrencies and then we have energy shortages, it actually makes the money more expensive. It's a different and weird new relationship that we don't really have any comparison for. So coming into the end of the year, if we do have some sort of further constraints on the energies that we have, we could actually see some of these cryptocurrencies go fully parabolic because they become harder and harder and harder to obtain due to the fact that there's that lack of energy. And that would not also have negative effects on the actual spending of the currencies, though, because they power themselves through the use of them. And that's something we're going to talk about in a little bit. So you have that, right? All the currencies operate on this infrastructure, this energy infrastructure, okay? And then you go to the hard drives, and then they use the internet, and the internet is also the metaverse, which it can be powered on different blockchains or different devices, whether it's your MacBook or whether it's your Asus laptop. You can mine on these or and use these technologies, okay? So then the actual currencies that you're using would be the layer on top of that. Okay, so just reiterating, you have the energy, the infrastructure of the country, and then you have the internet or whatever hardware device that you use to actually access the cryptocurrency, and then we have the cryptocurrencies on top of that. Okay, and that would include Bitcoin and Ethereum, and even the Binance coin or Solana, Polkadot, Cardano. And then and so those are the cryptocurrencies. And on top of that, then you have the other products, which are like the stable coins, NFTs. We also are now seeing in the environment, people are creating tokenized stock, which is a cryptocurrency variant of an actual stock of a company, which is really interesting. And everyone is familiar with an NFT being a non-fungible token. That's something we talk about in the first class. But we even see new products being made like semi-functional tokens, semi-fungible tokens, which are very interesting. We'll kind of break that down a little bit further. I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that layer, okay? So breaking it down again from the start, we have the infrastructure, the energy, and then the internet, the metaverse, or the hardware that you use, and then the actual cryptocurrencies, and then the assets on top of that, the stable coins, NFTs, and then on top of that, then you get to what people might have commonly heard as DeFi, decentralized finance, or even other centralized services. And what I mean by centralized services, I mean your brokers like your OpenSea, your Binance, your BlockFi. That's where these products exist, and more like services exist. Okay, and those are your exchanges, and the finance a decentralized finance, the DeFi products are going to be like Compound, and people sometimes mistake something like Compound for a cryptocurrency, but these are actually different. So we'll kind of break that down now. So just one more time, just to reiterate that. So you have the infrastructure, you have your hardware, then internet or the metaverse. On top of that, you actually have the cryptocurrencies. Then you have your stable coins, NFTs, SFTs, and then those other pieces of the decentralized services and DeFi. Okay. And that's like the layering that you need to understand. That's what's going on in the infrastructure of the stuff in the background. And so now we're going to go ahead and just break right into some of the more technical stuff. The first thing I want to get everyone caught up with is the engineering behind what blockchain is. Blockchain is, the actual concept of it is actually not that revolutionary. It's a very catchy keyword, but it's actually the most consistent thing across the cryptocurrency space. This blockchain engineering is it's not changed, and it's the concepts existed for a little bit. So what is that? So you have to think of you can think of it literally as like blocks that are set up in a chain. So what is each block? Each block is a validation of what has occurred on the for whatever process. Now for Bitcoin in particular, this would be a transaction. So someone makes a transaction, that transaction, the data is then put into a block. And then when the next transaction occurs, that block shoves that block down the line, and then they create a chain. And so blockchain literally is just blocks of data in a chain that are chronological. Now it's very important to include that piece of it. It is always chronological, and it is uncorruptible. Or nearly uncorruptible. It's only theoretically can be hacked or manipulated at this point in time. So it's important because it creates an indestructible ledger of history, and that's incredibly valuable because because winners rewrite history. Well, I mean, if you track everything on the blockchain, it's all very trackable. Now, and that also kind of brings more clarity to some of the regulation fears around people not being able to track transactions done on Bitcoin. This is actually not true. This is the products that are built on top of Bitcoin that have that layer of secrecy. Bitcoin itself, just as a basal product, and blockchains in general, are actually some of the most trackable and most valid technologies that exist because they're impenetrable records of history. And if you're having trouble understanding that, you could think of like when you go to the grocery store and you're wanting to go to the deli section and get some meat. You'll all get in line, and then you take a ticket. That ticket is your transaction. The ticket feeder is the blockchain, and then the deli worker is your actual miner. That's the actual hardware. So the miner takes the ticket, completes the transaction, and then that transaction gets put on their books, and then they have a track record of everyone's orders in order. That is a process of blockchain that we use in our day-to-day life that might help people better process it from a non-coding standpoint. So that is what is used for all of the cryptocurrencies. This is blockchain in the background. Now, where they vary is in their proofs. And proofs are really interesting because proofs are the process by which a currency will validate the transactions that occur on its blockchain. Now, these are usually like academic mathematical theories. Many of them actually stem from different philosophical ideas of governance. But we'll go ahead and start with the most common, right? So Bitcoin, of course, has its blockchain, and then Bitcoin uses proof of work. Proof of work is a validation process that uses complex equations that are solved by the miner to then validate the transaction that's occurring. And so when you think about it, to maybe provide some more clarity and give you a better picture of what that's like. If someone wanted to hack a blockchain, they would quite literally have to hack every single computer that was doing the mining. If you think about that, that's international, right? So that's literally millions of computers that they would have to hack at the same exact time. But then to actually get to the blockchain, they would all have to complete the proof of work process at the same time. And each single computer has a different randomly generated complex math problem. In the way that these problems are developed, they're actually simple rules that are then randomly assorted and to create a more complex problem. So they're actually measurable. You can control how difficult the problem is. And the thing is that if you're trying to solve millions of different problems all at the same time, and then every single transaction re-randomizes it too, right? So if it takes them 5 minutes to hack it, they have to actually solve like 500 different complex problems at the same time in hopes that they can crack all of them at once, which is, by all means of what we understand of technology right now, is not possible. You would need a very powerful quantum computer to do that. And that's what makes Bitcoin so safe. Now, the trade-off for the proof of work in particular is that it is really expensive on your infrastructure, on your base layer. It costs a lot of electricity, and it's extremely demanding to use that type of proof. That validation process is very demanding on the system. And what that means is not only is it then expensive on electricity, but it also means that it's very expensive to use as a form of payment, because the work to get that transaction done and verified and put on the blockchain is extensive. And so that creates further complexities. And that's where a lot of the other cryptocurrencies enter the space. So the next one that is definitely worth mentioning would be Ethereum. Now, Ethereum uses what we would call a proof of stake. And proof of stake is really interesting, because proof of stake is actually all just about how many coins the owner holds. And then they get to allocate more energy to themselves based off that. Okay? So it's actually like like getting a verified check mark on Twitter. A miner with a lot of coins is considered more valid than another one, and therefore it can process more transactions and is considered more valid. The thing you have to consider, though, if you give it some thought, is that actually leads to, it's more manipulatable. It can be more easily manipulated. Holy cow. My English gave out there. But, and so it creates more issues in blockchain, right? Because you could theoretically just, a bad actor could end up getting a bunch of Ethereum and then have a greater weight in the decision making of what occurs on the blockchain, because they can draw most of the power to themselves. Now, the nature of these being decentralized makes that pretty difficult to do, because one miner can't work super hard over another miner. And because there's so many actors dumping so much money into the space right now, no one really has a greater majority than anyone else. It's a nice power balance for the time being, and this also allows them to create reserves, though, because the people who own the most cryptocurrencies in that space have the most power, and they stake those, and the staking creates a treasury. And it's like a little bank that the cryptocurrencies can use. And what that does is it helps them better manipulate the price for the transactions, because that's the other issue that Bitcoin has, right? And so Ethereum's actually undergoing what they call EIPs, which are Ethereum improvement proposals. And those Ethereum improvement proposals are different processes where those with lots of stake in the currency can vote on future changes to it. So lots of people might know that there used to be an Ethereum Classic, and then an EIP occurred, and there was a proposal for a new way to set up the cryptocurrency that became Ethereum as we know it now. but Ethereum Classic was just a split off. And that's what a lot of these cryptocurrencies do. Now, Bitcoin will never do this, but the other cryptocurrencies are more flexible. So Ethereum's, when they split off, it's called a forking of the chain. So part of the Ethereum cryptocurrency runs now as Ethereum Classic, and then the more popular one is the basic Ethereum. And then there was another EIP, which is now known as Ethereum 2. And Ethereum 2 is just another improvement proposal that is looking to upgrade the cryptocurrency so that it can be better integrated into use in society. Proofs of there are endless proofs for the other currencies as well, and these they're endless because you have to remember that these are academic studies most of the time that are then researched and studied and mathed out to see what is the best process. And the game that they all aim to achieve is to find a nice balance between the amount of energy that they have to draw from and the amount of the efficacy and efficiency of the transactions that they can apply. Now, it's important to think of Ethereum different than Bitcoin, though, because if you know, like I just expressed, Ethereum has this ability to adapt that Bitcoin doesn't. So the best way to think on these on a technical standpoint, what we didn't really cover in the first class, but I would like to further develop in this class, is that Bitcoin is basically going to be a reserve of wealth, and you should think of it more as like a gold. And then Ethereum is actually more like a technology. Ethereum is an actual technology that it can adapt and change and be developed upon as time goes on. And so this allows it to then serve all types of different purposes and have other products that are similar to it or built upon it. Okay, so there's different EIPs that can fork different chains and create different services, or you can just create new white papers and solve different problems. But all of these are done with money. But this money is also energy. Okay, so we're going to go through just one more proof. Because keep in mind, these are endless. But another popular proof that I really like is proof of capacity. So the proof of capacity is used by it's used by several different coins. Actually, we'll probably cover two more proofs because this one will lead to another proof. Proof of capacity is the goal it's trying to solve is to decentralize cloud storage. Now, cloud storage is expected to be a $27 trillion market by 2035. It's currently one of the fastest growing technology sectors in the world right now. And one of the really interesting things that you're seeing a race towards solving in the cryptocurrency space is coins like Filecoin are trying to use the individual's access storage on their computer as a hub of storage, so that it's decentralized among all the computers, like we talk about, like with the Bitcoin miners, they're all over the place. Well, if those were set to stead mine Filecoin, then they would also be using their excess storage for anyone who wanted to store things on the Filecoin blockchain. Now, this is a really interesting concept because it's another way for us to generate extra passive income. Because rather than paying for a transaction to occur, when you elect to be a Filecoin miner, you're actually just acting as a participant within the decentralized storage space. So you're going to actually get paid through this mining process for storing other people's content on your computer. And this content is only, let's say if someone has a file that they uploaded to the Filecoin network, that content would get dispersed among all different computers that would be unable to view the content that they were that they were keeping stored. And So I wouldn't, if I was keeping stuff on my computer, I wouldn't be able to access it or corrupt it in any sort of, or manipulate it in any sort of way. So it's super safe, and then I would also get paid for it. And it's a really interesting concept, and it's something that could, by 2035, it's hard to imagine that you won't see AWS or some of the largest, fastest growing companies actually that exist in this country get quickly displaced by these new cryptocurrency technologies, because this technology in particular is kind of already here, and it works well, and what it really only needs is just more adoption of it, more people to use it. And when you look around this space, the amount of people that are starting to use this is rapidly accelerating, and that's because on that second layer that we talked about, the infrastructure and energy, right? And then you have your hardware, internet, metaverse. Well, that hardware is rapidly expanding. So you can even run a miner on a Raspberry Pi, which is the little computer in your phone. And you can set those up to even be little miners. Now, give me 1 second. I got a cough. I'm gonna pop in a cough trap. I'm still a little sick. I'm gonna check in on the class. So we got some more people in here. That's awesome. Okay, so now the other part of the proof of capacity is or proof. They also call it proof of storage. Or proof of space. That's another issue with academic. If you were, I majored in biochemistry and biotechnology, so I was very used to this when I was reading through these. But a lot of times, different intellects or individuals will create their own name for something they discovered, but two people might discover the same process, but then name it something different, and then be like, well, I discovered it, so that's the way it's named. And then you end up with 3 different ways to name the same exact thing. And proof of capacity is kind of an example of that, because you'll see that interchangeably used with like proof of space or proof of storage. And then occasionally you'll even see slight differences in those, right? Because different people technically made them, and this whole industry isn't established enough or have a conversation that's spanning across the space collectively enough as well, because everyone's kind of in their own little space working. They're not really aware of everything around them. So even people in these NFT projects, I'll talk to them about other NFT projects, or someone working like the Solana team. I got to talk to them. They were completely unaware of what Cardano was doing. I'm not completely unaware, but each of these people, they're deep in their own projects. So. And that's why things like that occur. But there's a very interesting other type of proof, probably the last one I wanted to cover, which is your proof of space-time. Proof of space-time is really interesting because it's the same instance, right? So you're going to use storage on your device, and you're going to get paid for it and through your mining process. But you have this additional functionality of knowing how long it's been stored. And I wanted to mention that because it starts to show, and it can help you start to realize how endless these functionalities become, and how you can build, okay, let's add this little detail on it. Okay, we can store the information. Now let's actually track how long it's been stored, and then there's different people who want to track like how many times it's been transferred or how many times it's been divided. As in like how many times the information's been divided, or how across how many miners you want it to be stored. There are all different ways or different types of information that can be tracked or held within the miner, and these are all different problems people are trying to solve and trying to find different utilities. So when you're looking at these coins, it's important to understand what kind of proof they're using, because that proof is going to give you a good indication of how much utility this coin will actually provide. And understanding the mechanics of it is going to be really important, because like I said with the proof of stake process, there is potential for that to be manipulated. And lots of coins do have proofs like that, where There will seemingly be some red flags or reasons for concern. Dogecoin was one of those where as you expand it out more, it actually creates its own issues, and then it doesn't have the functionality that you would like it to. So those are really important things to keep in mind for the actual utility of these coins. Now, I think let me check my point. Okay, yeah, that's what I was going to cover next. Okay, so on top, we're gonna backtrack. So Ethereum's more of a technology, right? And then Bitcoin is more of a storage. Now there's technologies that are built on top of Bitcoin to help solve this issue without using something like Ethereum. Now the issue would be the fact that Bitcoin is just entirely not usable as an actual payment source. Now I am aware of the Taproot that actually I'm fairly certain was just launched today, and it is very similar to what I'm about to talk about now. And considering that just got launched today, I probably won't go into detail about it, but maybe in a future YouTube video, or if you're in the educational portion of the Discord, I'll add some further detail into that. But it functions very similarly to solving the same problem that I'm about to talk about with the Lightning Chain. And the interesting about the Lightning Chain is that it functions on top of Bitcoin. And Lightning Chain solves a whole bunch of problems. Its main goal is to make it so that you can actually use Bitcoin for transactions. And these transactions are going to be a lot cheaper. They can fluctuate in price more. And the main goal there is be as fast as possible. Because you don't have to work for a bank or third party or anything. But also, it allows for some really interesting concepts, as in it's impossible to censor anything done on Lightchain. I mention that because there's different products that now exist on the Lightning Chain network that you might not expect, because people mostly think that it's just for transactions, but there are different podcast programs that exist on the Lightning Chain. And the way these work is when you click to play the podcast, you're automatically paying for every second that it plays. It's interesting. It'd be like if you play at the YouTube video and you were paying for every second of the YouTube video you watched. Now you would pay something like a millionth of a penny for every minute of the video. But the really interesting thing about how these cryptocurrencies function is that they are energy, right? And so the actual act of paying for it is also what powers it. So it's just sitting in an abyss or on a hard drive somewhere, and then when you use the Lightning Chain and you pay for it, you're simultaneously powering it. That direct connection between not only the technology but also between the producer and the consumer means that no mediary can step in and censor it or manipulate it, and that is a very, very powerful tool, especially in a world that is quickly being conquered by more authoritative regimes and governments. And that is another reason why China has cracked down so hard on these cryptocurrencies, is because there is such a threat to them being able to keep these strongholds on people and the type of and the content that they can the type of content that they want them to see, rather than them having the freedom to produce and process whatever they would like. And I'm just going to check on time real quick. We're at 7:33. It's pretty good. Okay. So that's a really interesting thing. And that's a technology that exists now. Some people are actively using it. It's very interesting. Some people are using concepts like that in the cryptocurrency universe to even create new social medias where people's data is actually safe and privatized. And some people take that a step further. and Basic Attention Coin would be an example of that. And that is a cryptocurrency that says, okay, it's exactly like the Lightning Chain, right? So whatever material you're processing is being paid for, except it's the opposite. When you click to watch the video, you're getting paid by the network. And it's done in that opposite way because you actually opt into these advertisements. And the advertiser's money goes directly to you and they pay you for your attention. This is a really interesting concept because that actually disrupts Google and Facebook and any company that's making money off their ads. Suddenly there's this format that advertisers can use, or they don't have to pay a hefty fee to another company. They can rather just pay the person directly. And this actually can help them build a better relationship with their consumers. It's a really, really, really interesting concept. In particular, that one in particular I'm kind of infatuated with because we do live in such an attention-based economy where everyone's fighting just to get even like 5 minutes of your attention. There's so much content that you can take in that you really would need to actually pay people for their individual attention, probably eventually, especially when you empower each person to have their own podcast on like a Lightning Chain or something. They were going to advertise that. It's just so much. You need to further delegate what you will give your attention to in the day because it's valuable. Okay, so let's go ahead and give me a moment. We're getting through this. I'm sorry if it's hard to understand me, folks. Okay, so the next thing we wanted to cover was the actual products on top of the coin. So your stable coins and your NFTs. The NFTs are, now we've covered NFTs a lot, and their uses, and they're going to further expand into insurance, legalities, voting in the future will most likely be done with NFTs. Commercial real estate will most likely be done with NFTs. And when I'm talking about this, why am I so certain on this? And that's actually because of what's known as smart contracts. And smart contracts are an extra layer of coding that is built on top of the non-fungible token. Okay, so these smart contracts usually use military code. Two examples of that actually are Plutus and Haskell code. Those two in particular are even used by Cardano. These types of coding, because they're built on the blockchain, that can't be hacked, that can't be manipulated, and they fulfill their own coding when the parameters are filled for them. Okay, so let me provide some more further clarity there. Let's say you had an insurance contract set up with a NFT. You would buy, first of all, your NFT would be made for you, and it would contain all your insurance information you need. It would be validated by a miner, so you would know it was legitimate, and it could be legally proof that you own this insurance contract. And then what else occurs? Well, when your house burns down, you're not arguing or going through a big legal process or battling with a bunch of nonsense over how you're going to get paid, because it's agreed upon beforehand. So it's important to understand how much of the industry or even processes have to change to make that happen. But it's also important to realize that that is what the future is, because so much money is saved by doing that process. It's expedited. It's so much quicker. Sorry, I keep bumping this mic. That's bad. And even a better example of that might be easier to conceptualize would be if you were doing like a legal battle, or even just any of the legalities for setting up these smart contracts. Because people will say, well, then you wouldn't one conversation I had with someone was, well, then you wouldn't need lawyers, right? It's like, no, they'll just participate in a different part of the process. Instead of having lawyers that will battle out how you handle the litigation of the actual trial, there'll be lawyers that will be handling the actual terms of the smart contracts. And once those are set in stone, there's no going back on it. And so if you're in a legal battle and let's say you're an artist and you're saying, oh, I want this document to say that the record label must pay me 15% on all the royalties. Well, a lot of times what's occurred in the past is record labels will break these deals, they'll screw over the artist or actor, whatever creative it is. This will not happen in the future. You cannot break these. You cannot hack the blockchain, and you cannot break these smart contracts. People will have to be held by their word, and that's kind of like a exciting and for maybe many authoritative governments also terrifying concept, because if you take that to something like voting, suddenly there's absolutely no way to manipulate votes. And even if you were, and you would avoid dead people voting, because you would simply build into the smart contracts that when their deceased letters are created, that the NFT is destroyed, and you could build that into the NFT. So there's like and that's just one example too, because you could endlessly build upon these, and just the concept of what the future looks like with those is really interesting. And I guess we've talked about NFTs a lot, so I'll kind of wait and see if there's any questions before I kind of dive into those anymore. We're at 7:41, so I'm just going to cover that last layer that we talked about at the beginning with another cryptocurrency that I really think is interesting right now, called Cardano. And Cardano is really interesting because it's one of the only cryptocurrencies that actually works both on and off chain. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that Cardano can also play the role of a centralized banker in a traditional finance environment, as well as being its own decentralized cryptocurrency. And so it tries to play all the games at once. It's one of the only cryptocurrencies that we know of that does this. And I want to mention this one in particular because if you were wanting to get one coin to study that would teach you a lot about all of them, this would probably be that one. Because remember I said that most of these are created with academic papers, correct? Well, Cardano in particular, and when I say academic paper, you might be visualizing like a single page paper. That's not at all what I mean by that. These academic papers are packets. They're thick. They're peer reviewed. This is research that's tested. Usually there's experiments that go with them, a hypothesis that's pitched and then scrutinized, just like with any research paper. So there's about 100 and there's well over 100 different academic papers associated with Cardano, and this is incredible when compared to most of the coins that you see people buying because they're hyped or excited. These usually are just one paper. It's not pure. Sometimes it's not even peer reviewed, and it's just like a wild theory that they have. And what you're doing when you buy their coin is you're actually actively participating in their experiment. And so that's why you can see some of them just completely crash and fail, and you just lose everything. So it's important to consider that. Not only the corruptibility of some of the types of proofs, but then also the integrity of what cryptocurrency you're buying. So let's go back to Cardano. Cardano then is technically one of the most valid cryptocurrencies that actually exists in this industry. which is fat because they put so much effort into making sure that everything was well tested before they decided to put the cryptocurrency together. And one of the reasons that they did that is because Charles Hoskinson worked with Valitech to create Ethereum, and then later, after a falling out between the two of them, then worked with several other coders to create the Cardano network. And so when he did that, he actually improved on a lot of the issues that Ethereum was having. One, you don't actually have to stake anything in Cardano. So that's another thing to consider, is that these proofs are ever changing. This environment is rapidly changing and improving as well. Which I guess I should have mentioned, by the way. Let me stay on. Well, let me mention this actually. When you consider, so like with everything I said about Cardano so far, you might be thinking, oh, I better get rid of my Ethereum and go or hop onto Cardano. Or you might be even seeing something like Solana and be like, oh my gosh, look at Solana. It's quicker than Ethereum and Cardano. I better hop off the Ethereum train and hop over the Solana. And one of the things that you really want to keep in mind is where are most of the developers and where is most of the attention on? Because it's not gonna because these things can through those Ethereum improvement proposals, there are different variants for that for each cryptocurrency. Those things allow these to infinitely improve, right? So really where you want your money is wherever the most people are working to improve it. And so these other cryptocurrencies need to compete with Ethereum to snag some of the brightest minds to build on their cryptocurrencies. And so when Solana is like, we're going to compete with Ethereum, you need to understand that Solana is sitting there with like maybe 100,000 developers, and Ethereum is unaware of them with their 24.5 million developers. And that's a huge moat. When I mean moat, when I say moat, I'm usually referring to like a company that has some sort of competitive advantage that no one else can overcome. And that would be Ethereum's moat, is their massive developer base. There's so many people that operate with the Ethereum platform to create their own products. And so that's really what you're competing with, not just the technology, because these technologies can so rapidly change that someone trying a slightly different thing might not necessarily give them competitive advantage. I guess the best way to think about that would be like the big monopoly and tech companies can just buy out all their small competition, right? It's basically essentially what Ethereum can do with all the people that are working on it. And so, yeah, we're actually looking at 7:47, so I'm just going to hop and see if there's any questions in here. I've heard that before. Okay, actually, I don't see any questions. Can hear you great. We heard that before. Yeah, the AWS. Does anyone have anything coming to mind? Anything that they'd like to ask about in particular, covering the different cryptocurrencies? We got about 13 minutes here. If not, I'm going to talk about my anticipations of regulation. I'm just going to see if anyone's typing here. We do have Jake typing. I'll give Jake a moment. Oh, actually, while Jake's typing, I'll just go ahead and say that I think internationally, a lot of these authoritative governments are going to panic, and most of them will ban cryptocurrencies because these technologies are a direct threat to them and their control of their populations. And they're going to become more and more panicked about it. Okay, this is not directly to deal with cryptocurrencies, but this is going to be the reasoning for why they are pushed to be even more stringent on their banning, is because this energy crisis that we're entering into internationally, this is the worst type of environment for authoritative governments. When food prices and energy prices start skyrocketing, people revolt. It creates greater wealth gaps, and it hits a breaking point really quickly. I'm thinking sometime early next year or even maybe late December, we will probably most likely start to see some very harsh new regulations come all over the world, as more authoritative and controlling governments have to fight this technology from basically undermining their rule over the people. Because that's not an exaggeration too, because a lot of people think that these technologies really aren't at the point where they can pose a threat, but they definitely are. Cardano especially. Well, Jake's still typing, so I might as well get into this. Cardano is doing a very interesting strategy to try and work around Ethereum's moat. Like, Ethereum's moat is the developers, but Cardano, and even Charles has been very open about this. His whole idea is, what if I just get most of Africa to already use it? Because banks don't want to work with this very volatile environment. And he is actually just gone around and taught people how to use this both on and off chain products to fill any need. Because it can work both in South Africa, where there's more infrastructure and you need less of the decentralized aspect. And it's also even cheaper, so then it's easier for them to incorporate it, but it also lets them fluidly work with the rest of the centralized banks. But it can also work in more secluded areas where it's just that decentralized product that can just work off a crypto wallet. And what it allows is people to start businesses online without the need of a Stripe or PayPal or Square to be in that area. And he's actually Square, Jack Dorsey, CEO of Square, has been trying to push for this, but he's actually losing to Charles, who's been doing a really great job of getting people to use these cryptocurrencies. And you also need to consider that the difference in an economy that uses something like Cardano or Ethereum or Solana over a traditional financial environment, the growth rate between those two is comparable to the growth rate between capitalism and communism. Like, a capitalist society is always going to grow exponentially faster than a communist society, because capitalism pushes greater rewards for greater effort than communism does. So people will push themselves to extremes and they compete with one another to create the best thing, and that triggers all this growth. Well, decentralization that occurs within the cryptocurrencies does the same thing as capitalism, but then it says, well, what if we also removed all the friction that exists within that system? When it comes to borrowing money, when it comes to completing transactions, there's no third party, there's no need for extra validation, there's no double ordering, there's no fraudulent activity, and it's quite incredible. So you're actually seeing that in Africa, because Africa's growth was already looking pretty good, but there's it's a very volatile social environment, and then with something like Cardano, you're really kicking up the growth that was already on a really solid swing. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and read Jake's questions. This is a little unrelated, but my coin. Wait. I don't know if I should read this out loud. Okay, what is my personal favorite? Wait, but my Coinbase account keeps telling me I cannot make transfers for insufficient funds when I have more than enough in the account provided. Are you meaning that it's you can? Are you remembering to check the gas fees related to that? Because these gas fees, which is which we kind of covered in the first class, a gas fee is the actual price to complete that transaction or to complete that validation process. Excuse me. But I like Coinbase, but the other. But you have to remember there's several different versions of Coinbase as well, because you have Coinbase and you have Coinbase Pro. And then they're coming out with Coinbase Prime. which I'm really interested in because Coinbase Prime is their goal with Coinbase Prime is to eliminate transaction fees entirely. I think one of the things that they're hoping to do is, one of the things that they might be forced to do is to only allow it for institutions that have larger fund amounts. But if they can start with that, much like Tesla started with the high quality fancy vehicles and then work their way down to more mass production, Coinbase might be able to do something similar in the cryptocurrency world with that Coinbase Prime. And so I'm really interested in that one in particular. But if we moved away from that company entirely, I do like Gemini right now. And I've been storing them. Okay, I'm going to read you another question now. Actually, let me spend an extra moment on that. Because there was Crypto.com is another popular one. Crypto.com is the one I hear a lot of people talk about. And of course, they have their own coin and they have their own products that are built on top of that. So there's a lot of development there and a solid management team. But I would warn you against working with any of the lesser known brokerages because they're likely, not all of them will survive. There's too many right now. There's definitely too many. There's going to be some consolidation. And that's why I still even though I like Gemini and I've been using them more, I still have a pretty sizable portion of everything in different Coinbase products. So it's kind of spread out right now. But I think it's important to intentionally spread out your cryptocurrency funds because of the fact that a lot of these will fall apart or could fall apart. It's not guaranteed. But it's not guaranteed that they survive either. Okay, question 2. In the event of countries moving currencies over to crypto, do you think the U.S. will have a stronghold on many things, resulting in possibly hurting other cryptos, transfer fees, or whole economies? Referring to the dollar milkshake theory. Okay, I think I get what you're saying. Yeah, that is a great thing to consider. So what Jake's getting at, if you didn't understand that, is he's wanting to know what happens if cryptocurrencies do become massively adopted. What happens to the dollar? Because the dollar is daddy. Dollar is king. Dollar rules the world. The U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency. Everyone relies on dollars. And what that means is right now when the rest of the world is hurting really bad, they need to get U.S. dollars to still participate in the global economy. And so when we're printing money, they have to print even more money to try and keep up with our money printing. And these cryptocurrencies are add a different level of complexity to that conversation as they become more widely adopted. And there's several different, I would say that there are lots of different theories, and I'll try and kind of touch on a few. So I guess the first thing to cover is what occurs right now with a lot of cryptocurrencies is that they're actually used as a method to gain dollars. So what a lot of foreign countries actually do is they are completing mining to get cryptocurrencies just so they can sell them and get US dollars, because that's actually what's more important to them right now. Because a lot of the governments don't actually see the utility in the cryptocurrencies. A lot of the governments are slow. They're not scientists. They don't get it. So that is something to also consider. And as far as taking over the U.S. dollar or putting some sort of disruption, I think yes. I mean, 100% that could happen. 100%. You could see some sort of global financial collapse. If the dollar is disrupted in any significant way, it's an instant global financial collapse. And if even if we default on our debt products, on December 3rd, the U.S. has to reevaluate their budget. We default on that budget. you'll see that. And those types of events would be bullish for cryptocurrencies. It would further push them forward because confidence would be lost in the Federal Reserve, and people will run to these cryptocurrencies that will displace the dollar from where it sits. And then, yes, a lot of power will be lost. And I actually think what is most likely, though, and what we could even see start to occur, or even conversations around it start to develop, is that the U.S. will probably most likely create their own cryptocurrency. They'll most likely be forced to do so. They cannot afford to have someone else do it, and they can't afford to have one of these companies step in and do it, because it would be in their favor, but I don't think that they would do this out of it would make sense for them to want to do it, because if you think about it, like when they're doing all the stimulus and they're trying to give all these people these checks, that whole process, when done with a cryptocurrency, is so much more precise, so much more trackable, so much more effective, so much quicker. So many things get resolved almost instantaneously when you're not working within a traditional financial system. They need to get money to a person. They need to get money to a disaster area. If you're in New Orleans and there's a big hurricane, the government could say, "Oh my gosh," and then boom, each person got $10,000, and it's like instant, to help with that area. Or these people need this money. There's no extra litigation or battling that needs to be done with that. So it would be in their incentive if their priority was taking care of the average man and woman to create a cryptocurrency. But I don't at all think that will actually be what pushes them to do it. I think they're going to be forced to do it because it's going to be... What time is it? It's 8 o'clock right now. This is probably actually a 25-minute description of the way that they can cheat themselves out of the massive debt we have by the creation of a cryptocurrency. But they have to be the ones to do it because they have to incorporate the dollar into it. But they would want to... Okay, the shorter description would be they would want to create their own cryptocurrency that isn't something like Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is a gold standard system. And they would not want that because they then can't continue to manipulate the currency. If they get out ahead of it and they create their own cryptocurrency, then they control the way it functions, and then they continue to have some sort of level of manipulation over it. And through more complex methods, they can also then carry over that debt and kind of help resolve some of their own issues with their debt. And the central banks will then completely give up who all benefit from the standardized way, standardized financial system. They'll all leave that. They already are leaving those safety nets that they benefit the most from, just out of greed. Because if they buy the massive amount of Bitcoin first, they get rich, right? So that's why you saw the banks actually move first. It's all greed. It's greed will push these products forth. Whether and that includes these authoritative governments, is they're probably going to fall apart if we actually hit some sort of global depression or recession, and then the banks or the insurance companies that remain will then push forward the cryptocurrencies out of just pure greed, and they'll actually help people in the process. And that's actually one of why I'm so bullish on all this, why I want to host these classes and teach people about this stuff, because I don't see any scenario where these don't become the future, become the way that we not only just do transactions, but like with that Lightning chain or with Cardano or Ethereum, but the way that we interact with any of our technologies in the future. And then if you go back and like watch our YouTube videos on the Metaverse, you can then kind of connect the dots with, you can kind of connect the dots with why cryptocurrencies are so essential to the Metaverse. Because if you're in the Metaverse and if you're interacting with anything in that environment, whether you're buying something in there or you're wanting to go to a different world or a different experience. These will all most likely be powered by different cryptocurrency technologies, and then therefore be completely decentralized. Which is why when people freak out about Meta, which is, Facebook is now Meta. When people worry about Meta owning most of the metaverse, I'm just not even. I don't even really want to participate in the conversation. I think it's silly. There's no chance of that. It won't happen. They might maybe temporarily have some sort of advantage because they're the first to create the hardware that's necessary, but they'll need so much more to have any sort of effect. So, all right. Does anyone else got any questions? It's like 8:04. So we put a solid hour in. Even got some bonus content. I think I covered some of the technicals and stuff. Everyone find this helpful? Learn something new? Yeah? Good stuff. Excellent. All right, well, thank you, everyone. I've also recorded the whole class, so if you joined late and you missed some of it, loved it. Okay, sweet. Well, thanks, everyone, for coming out. I hope it's all helpful. I will be posting this on YouTube tonight, and I will also put timestamps in for the video so you can jump around to the topics. I will see you all tomorrow at 8 a.m. with the market open. All right? Bye. Oh, actually, I gotta turn this off.